the conversations and the intersections that you have with people across the community and across the campus, because you're serving and you're talking every single day. If you're an average person going in for a coffee and you have a conversation with your barista, you may not fully process the fact that they're having those conversations with a couple hundred people every single day, and they know 5,000 people in the community.
Right.
And like, what's going on in the community? It's happening. And so it makes it really easy to then tie those connections together to say, oh, I was just yesterday talking to, this person in the Sustainability Institute, and you need to know about the program that they're doing here, and they need to know about what you're doing. And, so there's something really special about running a physical space and serving people and inviting people into those conversations every day.
You're listening to Granted Goodness, the show about optimism, progress, solutions, and problem solving in and around New Hampshire. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today I'll be coming to you from Durham, New Hampshire, where I'm speaking to Brian Bissett. Brian is the co-founder and executive director of the Freedom Cafe in Durham. The Freedom Cafe is a non-profit specialty cafe dedicated to ending human trafficking and the commercial exploitation of all people. We talk about chaplaincy, freedom, global commerce, purpose, community, and many other things on this episode of Granted Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Brian Bissett.
Right on.
Welcome to Granted Goodness.
Thanks, Andy.
I am so glad that we're talking right now, because I kind of just rolled into the shop around 4:30 and I caught you in the middle of your delightfully busy life. And I'm grateful that we're able to accommodate me, and we're having a chat here at the Freedom Cafe in Durham, New Hampshire.
It's really great to be with you, to be on the podcast. I'm rejuvenated already, just the few minutes that we've been getting to know one another and hearing about some of the other work that you've been doing and other guests that have been on. It's exciting. Definitely needed.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I find myself saying this about a lot of the people who come on the show, that, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. But I do really feel that way about you. You are one of these people who's kind of at the intersection of, a lot of my kind of like activist interests and like, all right, how do we make the world better? But also my social circle of friends. The last time that we met, my good friends, Kevin O'Brien and Hannah Sullivan, and Kevin does the music for the show. He's one of the singers in the band Sneaky Miles, who's generously let me use the music that people hear in the intro to the show. You officiated their wedding.
Yeah, that was a great experience. Went from a engagement party to a wedding in a matter of moments.
It was a fast engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that, I mean, you obviously, like, I was one of the people who was invited to it, and I wasn't in on the surprise.
Yeah,
so
that was sort of the whole trick
them,
to
right?
it, that it was going to be a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah, we prepared.
What did you think of that when they brought that concept to you, where you're like, oh, I love it, let's just...
Yes, absolutely. I was like, this is the most perfect experience, and in a great location. Yeah. Everybody's together. Yeah. That was so Kevin and Hannah, and such a fun thing to do.
Do you officiate a lot of weddings? Like, how'd you get into
Not a lot. I am an ordained minister. That's what got me started here at the University of New Hampshire back in 2002. And then everything else that I've done has sort of come and as an outflow of that, the relationships that I've made and the work that we've invested in. And so I still have my foot in that world.
Sure.
Officiating weddings is, I don't put my name out there to officiate just anybody's wedding.
They come to you.
It's people that I've worked with at UNH that I've known and loved, and we've spent time together, and it just feels like a gift that I can bring to, to support young people in their life.
Yeah,
like they're joining together. Yeah.
So when you say ordained minister, like what exact? Because I have a vague notion of, like, I know that chaplaincy is a kind of analog to some of that, where it's like it's a pairing of service and spiritual training of some kind.
Exactly.
Am I in the right path?
Yeah,
like, what is
100%.
an ordained minister?
Yeah. So, there's specific schooling that you go to for understanding, the background of your religious tradition and to become a chaplain. When I graduated from Plymouth State with an athletic training degree and a physical education degree, I moved on. I studied, I did an internship, a fellowship at American University in Washington, D.C., which kind of blew my mind, really. That was really powerful. And then I worked with Global University to get my ministry credentials and was ordained, I think you start out with certified, you kind of work your way up, and eventually was ordained in 2011 or 12, something like that.
Yeah. And so when did you know that was a path that you wanted to pursue? That's
a great question. Yeah. In college, I think, so there's a thread here, and we'll talk eventually about the Freedom Cafe and my work with the cafe to address human trafficking.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like threaded through my entire life has been this sense of seeing the world as a very interconnected web. And a lot of people use the term God to speak of that sense of connection, that divine spark that resides in every person. And it was in college, I felt like I was going back and forth between, a career as an educator, a career as a healer, with the athletic training aspect. I became a certified athletic trainer, worked in the field for a couple of years, and there was always this sense of I want to support people in their journey of being a whole person.
Yeah.
I think at a certain point, I thought, well, maybe the better way to do that is through a spiritual leadership pathway. I feel like I was partly wrong. There's really no good way, because no matter what career path you're in, it's segmented.
Right.
It's siloed. And when you're in a spiritual pathway, when you're in a religious tradition, you don't feel at liberty to necessarily talk to someone about their everyday habits.
Sure.
Or how their work is affecting the world. When you're an athletic trainer, you're healing an injury, you're working with someone.
Right.
But you're not touching on their career path or their relationships.
This is kind of a bizarre tangent to go down, but it's just coming to mind for me, Brian. Last night, I was having a conversation with a guy who came to the Granted Goodness guest reunion, a friend of Emmett Soldati's, and we were talking about the strange and interesting history of male body image and really the culture of gay men, and there's all this, there's this stereotype of gay men being really muscular, and where did that come from and why? And I read a book about this a long time ago, and they talked about the evolution of different kind of ideal body types over time. And there was, for a time, this movement in America and Europe called muscular Christianity. That was basically not quite like bodybuilding, but it was a lot of men would have this ideology of when we physically develop ourselves, it's a way that we can achieve a divinity or get closer to God, and
I can
it sounds
completely see that
silly, but there's something there, right, between people see the spiritual on all kinds of things, and kind of your calling to be I'm doing physical therapy with people, I'm healing their physical injuries, right? It's I see what you mean when you're these are all related to me, this is a spiritual exercise for me, and it might just be a physical exercise for you, but I don't know. So it's just this random chapter of things I remembered of there's people in time and history who they find all kinds of value and spiritual joy and meaning and the development of their minds and bodies, right?
Yeah.
So that's muscular Christianity.
Nice. There was a German theologian who a number of years ago now said that we need to let go of the term God and admit that we know nothing about what we're talking about for a period of time so that we can recover it. And I've respected and appreciated that a lot in my own journey, recognizing that I see the spiritual connection and spark everywhere and in people in so many different spaces and situations, and it draws me to be more aware and a better self, you know, when that arises. And it also opens up the opportunity to really connect with everyone, which unfortunately I think a lot of religious traditions have parsed people out into us and them groups. And so, you know, that's been a huge inspiration for me. I think it has been for a lot of people who are in and around justice work. And, you know, it pulls on the better threads of the faith traditions.
I agree. And we're getting like really deep really fast, which is great. But one of my favorite, I'm not like a Les Mis snob or nothing, but just this quote from the musical, which I know is based on the novel, sticks out to me. There's a line in one of the songs that says, "To love another person is to see the face of God," right?
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, like that's amazing. Who doesn't feel that way when they see the loved ones?
Absolutely love Les Mis,
right?
Just the entire concept of how someone's life is impacted by a moment of grace, or on the flip side, not impacted by it.
Right.
And how you see Jean Valjean go, you know, in one direction and just turn his life around to be one of the most generative people. And then, you know, the sergeant, I can't think what his name is. Javert. Yeah. Just like nothing affects him. He just has to follow the rules.
Right. Yeah. He's the letter of the law. You stole some bread to feed your sister. I don't care.
Yeah.
You're bad. But he redeems himself in the end. He has his own journey. I always forget to ask this question because I get interested in talking to people. Brian, could you tell me a little bit about your relationship with New Hampshire? You mentioned you went to Plymouth State. Are you from around here? You know, you live here ostensibly. I think you like live right
around the corner. Yep.
What do you like about New Hampshire? You're still here. Why?
Oh, that's a good question. So first, I grew up in Lewiston, Maine. Mm-hmm. My grandparents and a lot of extended family is in Waterford, St. Johnsbury, Vermont. So New Hampshire was sort of what we traveled through. You know, for my whole right in between for my whole upbringing. And the hiking in New Hampshire, I mean, going down to Franconia Notch, I've explored all of the Appalachian trails and the Notch, and you know, up Route 16 and up into Pinkham Notch and all Crawford, and I think that when it came to like a career and a place to be, having spent time in Washington D.C., northern New Hampshire felt like maybe a little hard to like, I wanted to be closer to, you know, Portland, Maine and Boston and, you know, cultural, close in between. And UNH just felt like a really inspiring place to be, near the ocean, the coast, the, you know, the beach and surfing, and be close enough to skiing, close enough to hiking. I mean, I do. I've really fallen in love with New Hampshire. I don't know. I mean, there's really good strengths, I think, to the two other states that I've lived in, you know, Maine and Vermont.
The show's not about knocking Maine and Vermont. We love them.
But I just think the diversity of outdoor experiences that we have in New Hampshire is uncanny for the size of our state. And I guess being down here, you know, in the seacoast and being, you know, next to the university, I have just thrived being near the university. The professors, the staff, the administration of UNH is so generous, and really wants to support the state and support businesses and support agriculture and support young leaders. And I feel like a big part of our state needs to maybe respect that more, and be willing to invest in that more. The amount of things that UNH does to support the state, and opportunities that it presents is incredible.
Oh no, I agree. I think that's a fair, whatever your opinion is on like, how much should people fund public education, right? Like what I think is, you can make a very strong argument that, relative to, other institutions of higher ed, like in the public space, like what UNH accomplishes, given the support that they don't get relative to other, state colleges and universities, is like, it's really, really amazing. Like it's just amazing. And I don't know that you appreciate that when you're a student, as much. Like when I was a student, I had a great time, but now that I'm like older, and sometimes people joke with me, they're like, your podcast is like the UNH podcast, because so many of the people, like, friends and professors and colleagues and people in extension, like, it's wonderful, and so, incestuous or self-referential is a more appropriate word to use. But a big fan of the university system, and I agree with everything that you have to say about it.
So yeah, absolutely love New Hampshire. And my son, who just graduated from Oyster River, he and 3 friends just at the beginning of the fall this year completed the 4,000 footers. They had made it their high school.
Are you
vision.
kidding me?
And so
there must be like 18, and they've done that. Like,
how many are there? That's a great question.
No, I mean, like, how old's your son?
Oh yeah, no, he and 2 friends did. All of them between their freshman year of high school and their freshman year of college.
Oh my God, they must be like the fittest high school. Good for them.
I would join them on a number of the hikes, and they just were miles ahead of me. And that was the point at which I was like, dang, I'm not a teenager anymore. Yeah. I'm not even a 20-something anymore.
It's good that it just hit you at that time, though. I think that's wonderful. So take me through, like, we're sitting here in the wonderful Freedom Cafe. This place, to people listening who don't know, I'll tell you my layperson's impression of it, right? I've been coming here for years, as a student, as an alum of UNH who, knew this wonderful cafe, and tons of my friends are musicians. They've come and performed here. Friends of mine have worked here. We have, the mutual friend Rachel Vaz, who's just a wonderful beacon of hilarity and genius and awesomeness, and she's one of my closest friends in the world. One of our board members. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, she's actually affiliated with the cafe. I don't know. I mean, the Freedom Cafe to me has just always seemed like just a real. I mean, in addition to its amazing mission, which we can dig into, it just a great hub for people doing positive things and experiencing culture and remaining like youthful and vibrant, but not necessarily, like, you don't have to actually be the age of a traditional college student to come here and feel like stimulated by the ideas and the energy of the people doing new things. It's just like it's all curated. Like, it's not an accident that is that way. And you're probably going to be bashful, but like, it's all because of you, or a lot of it's because of you or the people that you bring together, right? So I've had a lot of respect for what you do here for a long time. That's what I think of it. But what is the Freedom Cafe, Brian? Why does it exist? What are you doing here?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Freedom is a nonprofit cafe, which is kind of weird and unique in its own right. Our mission is to end human trafficking and commercial exploitation, very specifically. And right when we got rolling, we said we are a cafe and a collaborative space. And I think you're tapping into the collaborative space idea. And early on, people would ask us, we'd go to like a Rotary Club and talk about human trafficking and be like, what is a collaborative space? Collaborative has been a buzzword now for 10, 12 years. And, maybe people will have a better sense of what that is. But human trafficking is an issue that is affecting millions of people, 40 million people plus around the globe. Human trafficking is an issue that is affecting people in all 10 counties of New Hampshire. Surprisingly, probably for many. So every state in the United States. It is exploiting someone for their labor, whether that is traditional forms of labor, agriculture, construction, mining, or domestic servitude, or commercial sex exploitation. And to be human trafficking, it is the exploitation is through force, fraud, and coercion. So kind of the legal side of it. But because trafficking is hidden, because it's under the surface, it really takes like a deep sense of awareness from the community that it could be happening, and a deep sense from the community that we have to address some of the core vulnerabilities within our community, whether that is various forms of prejudice and oppression that create lack of connection, lack of support for people, whether that is poverty or whether it is a lack of access to resources. I mean, anyone can be a victim of human trafficking, but certainly those who have had adverse childhood experiences or are facing drug addiction, or parents that have had addictions, those create vulnerability. So the idea to address trafficking is that you have to be in touch with everything else that's going on in the social world and be the kind of community that wraps layers of protective support around those that are at the greatest risk. And so collaborative space is hey, we want to, well, when we got rolling, I mean, think about revolutions that have occurred. They've occurred around coffee houses.
Yeah, that's right.
The conversations are stimulating around coffee.
All the crazy stimulated young people go and they talk.
Passions. and so as soon as you put, a real intentionality around that, I think there's a lot of incredible social active businesses. But as a nonprofit with a very clear mission and a very clear directive to say, hey, we need to work together to solve some real issues in our community, to identify them and move forward. I think, again, kind of circling back, because human trafficking requires addressing sustainability issues and things that are arising as a result of wars and displacement in our society that are resulting from immigration, that is resulting from natural disasters. We are dealing with a place where we have to bring these ideas together, find other people who we can work with, and intersect and overlap to bring change. So that's the kind of energy behind the collaborative space, and why we've connected with a lot of justice-oriented young people and leaders around our community.
Man, that's just like such a perfect synopsis. We're the only two people in here right now, but I feel I'm sitting in like the revolution, so to speak, right? No, really. I mean, like to frame, like, it's such an interesting word, and everyone has their own relationship with it, right? But to have a collaborative space, to being very intentional about, we have this spot and we want people to use it for all kinds of things. And we have this mission, but the mission connects us to like all these different other things that, you might not think that, sustainability or, poverty or, talking to your neighbor or getting coffee are related to human trafficking, but like they are, right?
And to tie a little knot around why run a cafe, coffee is one of those commodities that is known to be produced across the globe from, I think, 19 countries with exploitive child labor. Chocolate, it has exploitive child labor and forced labor. Sugarcane, which is a tough thing to talk about because sugar's in literally everything, even things that we don't think sugar would be in. Sugar's in.
They probably put some in.
But sugar is one of the most exploitive agricultural products in the world. And recently, New York Times had a big story on a sugarcane plantation in India that Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola were implicated in, where women were being forced to get hysterectomies just so that they could keep working for their lifetime without interruption.
Yikes.
it's just such a rigorous labor practice, and there's a lot of exploitation in the industry itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like, I think it's great to, like, put it this way, Brian. Sometimes people, I think, have this perception of, when I say, hey, it's a show about optimism, they're like, ooh, great. It's about feeling good. I'm like, yeah, but what I'm trying to do and what I like hope to be doing, right, is to reframe, get away from this idea that optimism is like this, it's about like feeling good and like blah, 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 like everything's fine. It's like, no, the people who are working the hardest often on like solving really, really messy, complicated, like messed up things about the world, like they do it because they have to be optimists in practice. They wouldn't be doing the work if they thought there was absolutely no point.
I love a poem by Wendell Berry. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Wendell.
The man.
I'm trying to think if the name is actually "It's Hard to Have Hope" or if that's just one of the lines in the poem. But I think he like really wraps some language around, it's harder and harder to have hope the older that you get.
Sure.
And yet hope is that thing that is maybe a little different than optimism.
Right.
It's something that's grounded, and you have this trust that the work that you're doing is making change. And I think we do see that. Like you were talking earlier, pre-recording, that the world is, there's many things that are really getting better.
Yeah.
And it's easy to not pay attention to those.
Right.
And so to kind of move our vision and our perspective to where change is really occurring.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, kind of my view is that is often a more effective motivator to like get people, interested or passionate or connected to like something to make the world better, as opposed to being like, man, look at how awful everything is all the time, right? And I think you square that circle really, really well here, right? Like, to share what you just shared with me, right? And you could give me endless stories, and I want to get into all that, right? Of like, just like, it's hard for us even to conceive of like, there's someone on the other side of the world, and there's people here, right, who are being exploited, like you just said so, but who's having some forcible physical alteration to their body so that they can keep being used by some faceless money-making thing. It's just like, it's a level of horribleness that's like you can't even like really put into words. Mm-hmm. And like to really sit with it and think like, wow, that's real and it's really happening. And I don't know, I mean, we have such a privileged position here in the United States, and I think it's important for people to like be aware of those things, but also to find their way through them and to say, hey, we can talk about this, not so that you like feel horrible about yourself, but to be like, there's a way that we can make this better that, counterintuitively actually might feel good for you too. Like this is kind of the hack with some of the optimism stuff, is like, when you gather people here, I don't imagine you all sit around the table and go, all right, let's talk about how much the world sucks today, right? That's not what you're doing.
I think actually to square that circle right around, firstly, I feel like we're often cheerleaders of really great stuff that's happening.
Sure.
And so thinking about sugar and soda, another Plymouth State alumni like myself founded Maine Root. Maine Root uses 100% fair trade sugar. They were, if not the first, one of the very first sodas. And we see it carried all over New Hampshire, all over Portsmouth, the seacoast.
Yeah.
Great company. And they made a commitment without talking about it. They don't shout out that they're using fair trade sugar. They just said, this is how we're going to build our business.
Right.
And I think part of what we do here when it comes to commodities like that is try to say, we live also in a space where so many great businesses are getting off the ground that are sustainable.
Yeah.
And we want to introduce you to them.
Right.
We want to introduce you to some of the roasters in our region that are really making sure that where they get their coffee from is paying a living wage to the farmers.
Yeah.
We want to introduce you to chocolate, and you can go to any grocery store now at this point.
Right.
20 years after it really came to the surface that there was a lot of labor trafficking in chocolate, and you can find really great chocolate that's made with fair trade sugar, chocolate, cacao, and vanilla, and you can feel great about that. And so, squaring that circle, part of what we're trying to do is say, hey, we do get to vote with our dollar, and you've got options. There's some great companies out there.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'll selfishly pump a personal example. There's smartphones out there now. This company Fairphone.
I have heard of that. Yeah,
so that's a Fairphone right over there.
Nice.
Yeah, it's the real thing. And it works. Sometimes I'm not going to make that joke. It works. It's amazing. I'm really impressed. They're a Dutch company, I think. They're not technically like available in America yet. You can buy one through this like obscure partnership with this company called Marina, but they haven't technically released them. They only work on like the T-Mobile network, but they work pretty well. And this is a good example of like, me in my own life interested in trying to find like, hey, smartphone technology is amazing, right? Like it's really cool. We can have this like computer in our pockets. Is there a way to do that without all the other awful stuff that you hear about for like all the stupid planned obsolescent technology? It's like, and someone's doing it. I want to try and prove that there's a market for that in America, right?
Awesome.
And it's cool. And I get to have this amazing product, and they have made it at a very competitive price point relative. It's like people just need to think outside of the box a little bit, and I don't know. So I love everything you're talking about.
That's cool. I was a sort of rubric of thinking for us here, for me as a leader, is like you can speak and act to bring change to action, to attitudes, and to atmosphere. And there are some really quick and easy changes of buy this, not that. When you walk into Freedom Cafe, you are immediately greeted and welcomed into the space, invited to know that we have a mission and that we're serving everything on a donation basis. And I think that little switch that happens, some people just walk in and treat it just like they're doing any other transaction. Your recommended donation is $5.23. Okay, but there's also for people in certain moments where they're like, oh wait, what? I'm donating. And so for us, kind of in this moment, we're trying to inspire people that you are investing in a different world, a different economy, a different way of treating our relationships with people who are, growing your coffee and your tea. You're investing in their livelihood. And so we're hoping, to change people's attitudes towards commerce, and ultimately, I feel like we have a lot of growth to do, and like a much bigger, but to change, the atmosphere of the country where sustainability is just something that's normative and expected, where fair wages for people across the globe are normal and expected, and that's going to take some time, but hopefully we're moving in that direction.
Well, it starts. I mean, this is what I kind of enjoy about, reading about some of the quote unquote progress stuff, right? Is like, there's a mantra that people who focus on this stuff like to say, and I always quote it because it's great. And you basically have said the same thing, right? The world is an awful place, right? Because we know that, women on sugar plantations in India get forced hysterectomies. That's terrible, right? And there's kids who don't make it to age 5 for reasons that are completely preventable, right? Like, and even one is unacceptable to anybody, right? So like the world's awful because all that stuff is true. The world is also better than it used to be in a lot of ways that we can measure, right? 200 years ago, it was probably like 20% of kids didn't make it to age 5, right? Today, it's like 1 in 100, I think. It's like, it's not zero. We want zero, but no one is pro infant mortality, right? Like no one is like for more kids dying, right? Like we can all agree on that. And that's been a very positive change. And then the third statement is it can be much better than it is today, right? Much better, much better. And they all sit with each other at the same time, you know? And so it's like, how do we sit with, like, you know, and be aware of, like, whoa, there's, when you sit and contemplate the scale of, you know, both human suffering, but also the averted suffering, you know, that hasn't happened because we have made progress on stuff. It's like, it's so overwhelming to think about. And I love and think that a really good approach is, you know, just sitting and talking about with other people, kind of like you do here. And it's like, wow, how do we make this better together, right?
Yeah.
It's the only way we're going to do it. So I think of that mantra all the time, right? Like, it's all complicated. We have to sit with it, but we can do something. We're capable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's just me. That's my soliloquy that I always have to give it. So tell me a little bit more specifically, Brian, right? Like, human trafficking is an incredibly complicated issue. And your goal is to get it to zero. But what are some things, like, could you give me some examples of, I don't know, success or improvement on the issue? Or like I'll put it this way, right? You want to get to zero. That's a tough goal, but you can definitely make it better than it is now, right? So it's like, okay, what are some tangible ways that you feel like the Freedom Cafe makes it, you know, we might not get to zero tomorrow, but we can get to something better than today tomorrow.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you get there?
Yeah. So we've collaborated or have been a part of the New Hampshire Human Trafficking Collaborative Task Force for since about 2015. And what's been helpful there is that Freedom Cafe becomes sort of a grounding place that keeps the issue of human trafficking at the front of people's minds.
Sure.
We have been able to invest a lot into training across the state, and certainly these specific outcomes that I'll share now would never have been possible without the full task force that we just participated in, and played our role in. But through the task force, a series of trainings were like professional trainings put together for medical staff, for social workers, for law enforcement, for the legal professionals. And over the last 10 years, we have been able to be a part of a lot of those trainings. And so medical staff, statistically 70 to 80% of current victims of trafficking have some encounter with a medical professional.
Wow.
And so we're still at tip of the iceberg there in terms of training. We still have a lot of work to do to train all medical professionals in the state of New Hampshire, but most of the hospitals now have protocols in place. There's a level of training. Every single police officer in Police Academy now goes through a training about not only understanding what trafficking is, but understanding a trauma-informed approach to it.
Sure.
And so there's a lot more care going into how people are interacting, and how law enforcement is interacting with social work, because sometimes there are two very divergent goals there.
Right.
And so the training for law enforcement and social workers are able to see a potential victim, and rather than just seeing a criminal, be able to provide some services. So there's a lot that has gone on in terms of dealing with the crisis as it is. On the other side, I think we're trying to reach more deeply into prevention. And on the prevention side, again, like throwback to earlier, like how do we address the vulnerabilities that we see in our community? There's, here in the Seacoast, we have N68, an incredible organization that's saying young kids aren't getting enough food from Friday to Monday morning. What can we do about that? That is addressing a felt need, an important addressing an important vulnerability, and that's how we're going to ensure that kids are not going to end up falling victim to a trafficker's ploy of saying, hey, I'll offer you food and a place to stay if you do these A, B, and C for me. Again, we have Haven, another great organization that addresses domestic and sexual violence, but not just working with victims, but also going into our elementary schools and doing puppet shows and programs to help prepare kids to have a healthy body image and an ability to, find a trusted adult to share if something is not, happening in an appropriate way. So we have a lot of work to do to address vulnerabilities in the state, but there's great organizations are all participating in this task force approach to help address them.
And is it correct to say, like, this is how little I know about this issue, like, were a lot of people talking about human trafficking like 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago?
No, I think it really kind of two things happened. First, it became Nike, and like back in the 90s when a big sweatshop was discovered. It was kind of the first time that people began to notice. It's a really cool story. I don't feel like I'll get all the facts right, but if you look up the fair soccer, the history of the soccer ball production. Soccer balls were produced almost entirely by forced labor in this one location in Asia, and soccer professionals from FIFA to United States soccer to kids soccer leagues across the globe started to put pressure, started to raise awareness about that, to the point at which the soccer industry made a complete shift and helped get women who would have been working as forced labor in making soccer balls to have education and to get a job and to diversify and have a real factory. So that whole industry was reshaped by public pressure, professional soccer pressure, and governments getting involved to bring a significant change. So 2005, the chocolate industry faced a huge firestorm where people started to realize, like, whoa, the chocolate industry. And, we're trying to be on the positive side. I'd love to have seen more changes in the chocolate industry. Nestle was in 2019, two or three workers from Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, tried to sue Nestle, and the Supreme Court said, the conditions under which this lawsuit is taking place is unjustified, so Nestle's off the hook for having to take responsibility for the working conditions of farmers in Ivory Coast. But on the flip side, they have gotten in trouble recently. Just in 2024, the Supreme Court started a what is it called when you are part of a class action lawsuit. Find it back there. A class action lawsuit was passed where Nestle was kind of greenwashing some of their chocolate as being fair, and it's not, and they can't prove that it is. And so there's a class action lawsuit that if you've had Nestle's chocolate and you had this particular package, then you're part of that class action.
Wow.
So that's progress. That's exciting.
Well, even like the existence of like the conversation, like again, sitting with the whole messy, complicated issue of like, we want it to be zero. We want it to be zero today, right? Of course. But even the fact that like, okay, maybe the first domino to fall, right, is like the soccer balls, right? And then people start about chocolate, and it's like, it's hard, I think, to see like the trajectory, because like you're in the work right now, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, right? Like think of how different the world was 100 years ago.
Yeah, I've got another story, a fun story, and you can look up the Milk with Dignity project. Okay. So I think probably most of our listeners will have enjoyed a pint of Ben and Jerry's at some point in their life.
Like
Ben and Jerry's
4 times last week
as a business has been known for a long time as advocating for sustainability and fair wages, human rights, so a migrant workers movement in Vermont raised the question in the early teens of 2000 that migrant workers were living in squalid conditions, working multiple shifts in a row, not having access to clean water or a place to sleep. One migrant worker lost their life falling into a machine, and that sort of triggered a whole movement. And in 2017, Ben and Jerry's signed the Milk with Dignity certification, and they will only buy milk from dairy farmers in Vermont, New Hampshire, in the surrounding New England region now who have participated and agree to the Milk with Dignity project. And so that gives people access to clean water,
right,
a place to sleep, at least 8 hours between shifts, and at least minimum wage. So that's a big change, and it's I think for Ben and Jerry's kind of coming into that, I think initially we're like, oh, we never thought that we need to think about where our milk locally is coming from. And now I think we can know that there's work is being done with a much better dignity. So that's a really positive, encouraging story.
There are success stories, out there for this stuff. Another thing I kind of wanted to ask, right, is like you mentioned the New Hampshire, state task force, and I was reading a little bit on your website that, there's like the State Department of the federal government is also like they have involvement in this issue. Does the New Hampshire activity like fit into the? Is there like an umbrella for this? Like, do they all coordinate together?
The United States State Department is deeply involved, in the Justice Department as well. So the New Hampshire's task force, it got off the ground without just a complete collaboration, without any federal money, without any money at all, without any director, just volunteers giving their heart into it. But the federal government provided a grant to help get the task force off the ground. So I believe we got that for 2 series. So it's about 6 years. Task force funds came in to hire a project director, a couple of social workers, and a couple of law enforcement agents who would seed the awareness and help build those programs. At this point, one of the big changes that's been going on now are like in integrating policies into all of the different departments within the government, that because we don't necessarily always need a human trafficking task force. What we need is to make sure that people that are already doing the frontline work are able to integrate new knowledge and pathways of response into their current situations. So that's a big project that's been going on currently.
And when you say frontline, like I'm imagining, like is it all the people who are in a traffic situation? You said so many of them interact with people in the medical profession, right? Like is that like type 1A, the thing, like, cause I liked hearing, it was cool to hear you talk about, the training, right, as kind of this inoculant, like response that people could learn of like, oh, okay, I'm a nurse. Now I know, that wasn't just, an unusual couple of people who came into the office. I think that person was being human trafficked, right? Like teaching people in different professions to identify the signs, like, is that, when you say front line, like, is that what you're talking about? Or like, who's the front line of human trafficking?
And I guess, again, like with trafficking being this very entangled
there
web,
is a front
line is there's so we talk a lot about supply chain here. So front line would be who's managing the supply chain of a local business or a big multinational business, and what are they doing to understand the risks and vulnerabilities? So swing back to the State Department. The United States State Department puts together a list of goods known to be produced with child and forced labor every 2 years since 2010, I believe. You see that hanging on our wall over here, that gives a bird's eye view of the 204 goods that we know are at high risk of being produced with forced labor around the globe. And so if you're buying sugarcane, where are you getting it from? So the State Department is putting this report together. They've actually also created what they call the Supply Chain app to help business leaders address the vulnerabilities and risks in their own supply chain. Like, they make suggestions for policies, for auditing procedures, and this year's recommendations are moving a lot away from traditional corporate social responsibility into, we need to have workers' rights organizations on the ground. We need to find ways to give the workers in these factories a voice, as opposed to just having an isolated auditor come in and go through this process. And they have some huge success stories in Bangladesh, where whole manufacturing facilities are they're making huge progress in the safety of their workers, in the level of wages that the workers are making, in the contracts that they're getting. So that's pretty darn inspiring. And so frontline worker, we've chatted a bit with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility, and that's an inspiring organization. Again, trying to help businesses make it easier to make sustainable and human right oriented decisions in their business practices and policies, and celebrating those that are. The B Corp movement. Again, back to UNH, right? UNH runs a B Lab, and if every single business was a B corporation, I think our world would be in a much better place, because not that a B Corp is perfect in all of its supply chain or sustainability issues, but it's constantly on the radar of how can I be improving and growing and making better decisions. And, I'll ramble here a little bit. When I got started on this issue with some students at UNH that I was mentoring as a chaplain, we stumbled upon a phone app called slaveryfootprint.org. And you get on there, you do a survey of what you buy, what you wear, where you go, how you travel, how you invest, and it comes back and it you finish the survey and it says you have 33 slaves working for you, and or whatever that number is based on what you use, and we I think we just looked at each other and we were like, this is overwhelming. I would never want to put anyone in that kind of a position. That's not who I am. And so it really, I think our tone and our posture was sort of grounded in that moment, where we're like, I'll start with the bad and move to the good. There are some real, I can't use the words here, people
messed up,
real horrible people in the world that know exactly what they're doing, and they're exploiting people. There really are that. But the vast majority of people want to do the right thing and make good decisions that support the community rippling outwards. And like us, it's not inspiring to beat yourself up over the fact that you have a shirt that might be made in a sweatshop. Or drink a coffee. That our goal is not to beat people up over that. It's to say, hey, this is an issue, and in the moment that we're finding out about how hard this issue is and how real this issue is, we want to help you realize that there's a lot of great opportunities out there. And if over the course of a year, 2 years, 5 years, you just continue to begin to think about your personal life as a conscious consumer, let that overflow into, I think about it all the time when Halloween comes up, candy costs a lot. Giving it all away, but now you're working for, a student organization or a local community organization, and you have the money switch, and now you're thinking, how can I do something that's a little more sustainable and a little more supportive of the global economy and global workers, by making a decision. So that ripple can keep growing. As one person, what we buy over a course of a lifetime does matter.
Right.
It matters a lot more as we change as a society.
Yeah.
And we can challenge big businesses, multinational companies will change if the market changes.
Yeah.
Vincent Stanley, who worked with Patagonia on and off for years and years, spoke here at UNH a number of years ago now, and had written a book about his experience, and he quotes the apparel industry has never paid a living wage in its history.
Right.
And we're not going to just buy our way out of this situation. We need the market to demand change.
Right.
And so I do think, that there's a real opportunity for us here by changing actions, changing attitudes, changing atmosphere of, hey, as a society, we would like to see our businesses do better.
Yeah.
And they will.
Yeah. Well, none of it is, it's not written in the sky somewhere that like everything has to be horrible.
Yeah.
or that you can't have a t-shirt unless, it's people in horrible conditions made it, like, we know how to have the t-shirt without the slavery. We can do it. It's actually not that hard. It's extremely hard, but you know what I mean? There's some other wonderful people who've come on the show. And, sustainable fashion is kind of like their issue.
Yeah.
Jen Moore, who goes by Jam, Lionel Lovelace, who's the bow tie guy. They do the Project Upcycle thing over in Portsmouth. Yeah. It's exactly the stuff you're talking about.
I need to connect and collab. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, now you're both Granite Goodness alums.
Right on.
You're in the network. But no, I like what you had to say a lot. Right, of like when you see kind of the impact that some of these kind of passive consumer decisions can have. It's just like, this can be overwhelming. Another person who came on the show, Charlie Cummings. He started Walden Mutual Bank, and before that he started a company called Walden Local Meat, which it's on their website. He told me the story. He said, look, everyone who cares about this stuff, they know about factory farming, and it's hard to connect, buying a piece of chicken at the grocery store with like the suffering that you are intellectually aware that like the animal probably felt, right? He's like, you can do it, but they're so removed from each other that, beating people over the head with like, you're horrible, you're horrible, you're horrible. It doesn't work. It doesn't really work, and it doesn't feel good. But more importantly, it's not really a productive way to like move the needle on the issue. So he started Walden Local, which is all about, hey, can we actually try and connect, meat producers around New England who are doing it right, in the way that we would really, really want, treating their animals well and being really intentional about every part of the business process. Let's just connect them directly to the people who want to buy meat like that, right? And it's just like, so he has a whole mail order business that does that. And then the mutual bank was kind of an offshoot of that, because the bigger problem was like people wouldn't get financing. But it's exactly the same.
That's super cool. Wow.
Oh, he's the man. Yeah. It's exactly what you're talking about, Brian. Like lots of entrepreneurs, they're good people, and they see a better way, and they're doing it right now, because they say the market is there. I'm the market. You're the market. All our friends are the market, right? Like I went out of my way to buy the Fairphone, because why wouldn't I? It's just the switch has been flipped, and I don't mean that in like, you don't want to be patronizing to people, but if you can kind of show them through kind of what you're doing here, right, through like community and solidarity and, God forbid, maybe even a little bit of fun, right? Like you do music here, and like
we got to talk about music.
Yeah, no, we should. And I don't know. It's easy to get overwhelmed with like the data of like, wow, stuff is really hard. But if you actually want to change it, there's more to the equation than that, I think, and that's why you're on the show.
So we got to talk about music.
Yeah.
The very first thing that we did before the cafe was even born, was start an open mic called Perform for Freedom.
Yeah.
And it became this moment of catharsis for our team that was discovering an issue that was really overwhelming. And we all enjoyed music. But also, there was a point at which, we'd have conversations about how we could bring change. And we were always buying coffee and always drinking coffee and tea and going to coffee shops. And there was this moment of like, oh, well, we could probably make coffee for a lot less, and then we could invite our friends to come and play music with us, and everybody could buy coffee and tea and some baked goods, and we could give that money away.
Yeah, it could be a whole thing.
And so there was that sense that the music was catharsis, but also it's called Perform for Freedom because there was a mission window. There is a mission window still, 12 years later,
right?
And that mission window is, let's just chat for 3 minutes, 5 minutes about what we're learning, and maybe give some resources out there, or maybe we're really passionate about, hey, there's this safe home in New Hampshire that needs funding, so we're going to try to raise a whole bunch of money to get to that safe home so that they can keep their operations going. Or right now we've been working on a project called In Their Shoes. So we're working with a survivor advocacy program called Thrive New England, and we're going to be hosting in April the very first art exhibit where survivors are telling their story through the display of art painted shoes. It's kind of a way to get the survivors to begin to feel more comfortable, and to inspire people to understand what's going on in a creative way. But sorry, I told you I ramble a little bit.
No,
spin things around.
This is what everyone wants in a podcast. You're perfect.
But it sort of, so moving from music, music activists are some music is a draw for bringing community together. You can take a picture of it later, but we have a Leonard Bernstein quote hanging on our wall behind the counter. This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before. That quote was spoken after the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
That's when Bernstein, shared that quote. I mean, when you think back, through the years to, in the 90s and 2000s, some of the massive music events that occurred to raise funds to address, the flooding, to address famine, to musicians have constantly wanted to wield their ability, their fame power, their star power, their draw power,
bardic skill,
to serve society, to bring people together, and so I think that's been really unique for us to tap into that sense first from the inside out, musicians that were part of kind of the start of the cafe, but then also to just find musicians who are looking for a space to try new music, but are also passionate and feel like, hey, I'm willing to invest my abilities and talents here to bring people together for raising money and making a difference in the world. So we continue to have those mission windows, week in and week out, and it's been neat to see communities come together year after year after year, where you have a certain group of people who some maybe come once a month, some come almost every single week, and by the end of a semester where we've been doing our open mics, the community feels a sense of togetherness, and we're going somewhere in terms of how we might be able to address change. And out of that comes some of our consistent volunteers. Some of our research students have come from that that open mic night, and
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it's been 10 years, right? You said 12 years.
This is our 10-year anniversary. Yeah, 12 years since the open mic started. And 10 years since the cafe opened up.
Just when? Like this month or this year?
Our official 10-year anniversary date is April 3rd.
Wow.
2025.
Oh my gosh.
That's when we sent in our IRS papers and opened up the doors consistently.
Does that feel real to you? Like when you hear that 10 years, what does that feel like?
I'm definitely in a space right now of reflection.
Yeah.
Looking back over 10 years, we've done so many different things and made impacts in a lot of young leaders' lives that are now out really doing the work. Students that are in corporate supply chain management, students that are in social work, students that are in law, who are they are now frontline workers, like bringing their understanding of healthy policy and healthy addressing vulnerabilities to the surface, trauma informed care and such. But then also I think there's like anything, 10 years we're trying to think like where do we want to be in 2035? How do we focus in? How do we we have a board of directors that I'm so pumped about. We've just gotten 3 new leaders on board, and we want to see this organization grow, and we're trying to decide which thread is the best thread, whether it's trying to get more on boots on the ground cafes around New England to expand our influence, whether it's trying to get transferable programs into every college across the country, whether it's trying to get really great coffee that's paying living wage to farmers into every household in America. Those 3 things all could have impact on our mission, but they would require a different kind of investment. And so we're really in this strategic planning process, trying to think through, we've done all of those things, but which one is going to be the head of the spear that allows us to make the greatest impact on our work to address human trafficking.
If you could talk to Brian on day 1, like 10 years ago, he just filed the paperwork. Like, what would you say to him?
I wouldn't even know that I would be
talk
here.
To you? Yeah.
Like, who's that guy? You're going to actually have a cafe on Main Street in Durham. What would I say?
It doesn't have to be like lottery ticket advice or something. I was just curious about the reflections. Like, I don't know, where would he be surprised to see where you are now? Or would he be like, so. This was really cool?
Yeah, I mean, in my own way, I was a serial entrepreneur, not so much with social businesses, but I was starting numerous different kinds of programs to try to bring the community together. I served as community leadership program, adjunct professor at Thompson School for a little while, was bringing people together to understand some of the challenges in the world and pick a topic to address and find a way to bring change. So, Brian, then you're going to still be doing this.
Just letting you know.
Stick with it. I probably wish that I would have documented more and celebrated the other student leaders that were a part of it more, because I didn't think 10 years into the future at that point. And now I'm like looking at pictures and I'm like, some of these students' UNH emails, they've not been looking at for years and years. I have no phone number. And I'm like, man, how do I reach back and thank those students for their deep investment? We are far more than we ever could have been. I think, the nature of being next to a university and just intersecting with such passionate, smart, grounded, justice-oriented young people who had ideas that we were able to help facilitate. I think, I can name it now. I couldn't have then. And it's easy for me to just point and to all of the other people who have really made this what it is. And I guess, in looking back at the fact that I'm still here, I think there's something about my leadership style or approach that has been able to facilitate, to guide, to sort of help bridge different people together so that our passions could bloom, if you will, to be planted and really grow and bloom. So I feel proud of that and, encouraged by that. And the fact that we're still, every single year getting new young people who blow me away with the fact that they have an awareness of the world that I didn't have until I was 30 years old,
right.
or a commitment to really respecting people all the way through the entire globe.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
There's progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever I ask people what makes them optimistic or hopeful, that's a common answer, is like, man, the younger people today, and of course, I mean, people usually, I think, they tend to dismiss, like, they were probably more thoughtful than they're giving themselves credit for. But, I certainly feel that way. I talk to younger people today. I'm 29 and I already feel like I'm out. Like, I can't, it's harder we'll put it this way. College students I don't fit in anymore. Like, I don't, and I distinctly remember, like, when that stopped happening to me, which is fine. It's great. It's great.
One story has stood out to me for a good while, where a young person came to an open mic night because she heard that we were raising funds to build a clinic in Nepal. Her roommate happened to be from Nepal. So she came, was really pumped about the vision and what we were trying to raise funds for. This was end of fall semester. She went home over the holiday, raised $250 from friends and family.
Wow.
To go into the mission. We came back. She came back and shared, hey, I raised this money. I want it to go towards the cause. And I said, well, why don't we try to double that? And so we had our next Perform for Freedom night. We said, every dollar that you donate is going to be matched. And so we way overachieved. I think we, with the 250 match, we ended up with $637 that night on one night of an open mic night donated. So that student, was, again, like, over the top, excited about it. I find out later in the semester, after she continues to attend the open mic nights, that she's going to change majors, become a social worker.
Yeah.
And that she wants to join our volunteer outreach team. And so we put together a team with 5 other students to create curriculum that we could bring out to UNH.
Yeah. And
I helped oversee the creation of those. And by the end of the spring semester, we had done 23 education events on campus, including a couple of justice studies lecture halls, and we connected with over 900 students in one semester, just because this one student got passionate, about getting the word out and educating people. So that student went on, graduated with a social work degree, and became the New Hampshire Task Force's very first social worker working directly with victims of human trafficking in the state. The incredible, kind of holistic circle that took place there. That's not something that I ever would have known could have ever happened. Right. And we've seen other students change their career, change their whole career path after getting involved, and being able to focus in on how they can address trafficking.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to be said. You were talking earlier about, you're like, I don't know what it is, but something about my leadership style, right? And it's like, I think you're kind of onto it. There is something really great and profound and pragmatic and just wonderful about, whatever it is you do here in terms of, like, the vibe that you put out, or the people you get together, or the programming, or, the music, or even the food that you serve, right? Like, something about it just makes people feel like they're open to possibility and to discovering and trying and learning new things, right? Like, the fact that it's happened once, or even more than once, that you have come across someone, or they've come across you, a young person here in college or around a college at this time in their life that's, about self-discovery and figuring out what they want to do, like, that they come across all of this and they make real changes and discover new things, right? Like, it's not an accident.
Yeah.
It's not an accident.
I think it is very much similar. I enjoy gardening at home.
Oh, okay. That's perfect. Yeah.
And I think that there's, so much similarities between, as a community leader and being a gardener.
Yeah.
That, some soil is richer and some soil needs a little work, and you're always working the soil, you're always planting the seeds, you're always, trimming the growth and, helping cultivate, the best harvest possible. And so I feel like I think about leadership in that, mentality a lot. But you asked what else would I want to say, and it's funny, you threw out, the food that we serve. I feel like it's funny, like I spend, 50% of my time literally running the cafe, making coffee and tea, making crepes. And, I get up in an event like this and, I'm talking about our mission and our work. And I see the thread of connection through all of it. We talked a little bit about the experience at the counter, but I think I forget sometimes to talk about get out here, check this place out. We have we have incredible crepes and breakfast sandwiches. Our coffee is exceptionally good. It's an art, it's a craft for our team that's here. We have, beyond myself, we have my kitchen manager Angie bakes all the baked goods fresh. We work with B Corporation King Arthur flour, B Corporation Wholesome Sweetener sugar to get some really good ethically sourced ingredients. But Angie puts all the love and ability into making them delicious and beautiful, and we're focused on the third wave of coffee, where you're going to get a beautiful latte with a design on it with latte art. We want you to feel special when you're here. And I love the coffee side of it and the food side of it. It's really fun to serve people, and
everybody eats, right?
The conversations and the intersections that you have with people across the community and across the campus, because you're serving and you're talking every single day. It's really easy maybe for the average person to not think about it. If you're an average person going in for a coffee and you have a conversation with your barista, you may not fully process the fact that they're having those conversations with a couple hundred people every single day, and they know 5,000 people in the community, and what's going on in the community, it's happening. And so it makes it really easy to then tie those connections together to say, oh, I was just yesterday talking to, this person in the Sustainability Institute, and you need to know about the program that they're doing here, and they need to know about what you're doing. And, so there's something really special about running a physical space and serving people and inviting people into those conversations every day.
Yeah, I love it. It's like you set the table, and then everyone, it's like a garden, right? You garden. You make sure the soil's healthy. You create the conditions, and there's something to like a lot about that concept of like you were saying earlier. Say, hey, look, there's some awful people out there, but most people, they're actually pretty nice. They want to help. They want to be good, and if the conditions are right, people will help each other. They just got to show them that you're connected, and they want to help. All right, last question for you, Brian. What makes you optimistic or hopeful about your work, the future of your work?
Yeah, I guess we have sort of been talking about it in a sense, but in the state of New Hampshire, really having been a part of that task force, and seeing, here's the moment to talk about it. It's really easy to throw shade at people who are invisible to you.
Right.
And one of the things that absolutely just inspired me so deeply when I got connected to the New Hampshire Task Force, and I was sitting down across from the resident Homeland Security Director, sitting down from the Attorney General's office leader, staff person, sitting down with people who are government paid employees, who are leaders of Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, and being like, wow, these are inspiring people. These are people that I want to be around. These are people who are moving and shaking and changing our systems for the better. These are not lazy people. These are not people who are wasting our tax dollars. These are people who are really, really smart, who have worked hard to get into the positions that they're in, are not making enough money for the work that they're doing, but they're doing it because they believe in it and they want to see change happen. I'm hopeful that, like, with so many great people like that in positions of influence and power, change is going to just continue to grow. And I see the same thing again, with young people coming up and through who are like, yeah, no, I actually, want to go into data analytics. I want to go into supply chain management. I want to be a social worker. I just wrote a recommendation letter for a student today who is wanting to go into a master's in social work, after doing an internship here, knowing full well that she will probably never get paid enough for the work that she's going to be doing, right, wants to go into that position because she believes so deeply in the impact that she could make.
Yeah.
So that continues to, motivate me and encourage me, that we have a strong and healthy leadership in our state that is bringing change, and a strong and healthy young leadership coming up that's going to, hopefully carry on that work and even take it further.
Brian Bissett, thank you for coming on the show.
Awesome.
It was a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks so much, Andy.
And hey, by the way, you might not know this, but you're talking to one of your biggest donors. I think I gave $5.13 to the Freedom Cafe in June. I got the email.
The New Hampshire Gives. Yeah, I just sent out our annual.
Yeah, that's right. I got that. I got that on my way here. I was like, look at this. He doesn't know who he's talking to.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for investing in us for New Hampshire Gives.
Anytime.
We'll hit you up next June.
You can expect another $5.
All right.
If not more. All right.
Every $5 counts.
It does. Yeah.
Especially in New Hampshire Gives.
That's right. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks so much, Andy.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.